1. The air smelled of burnt sugar and torn metal, although the first month of winter stood in the yard. Frost could not penetrate this thick sweetness hanging over the tiled roofs and narrow alleys like an invisible blanket. People's breathing grew heavy, and a sticky aftertaste lingered on their lips that neither scarves nor raised collars could prevent. The streets seemed frozen in anticipation, but no one suspected the silence was deceptive. The wind carried strange crackling sounds coming from the waterfront, yet passers-by dismissed them as ice playing in the pipes. Snow fell unevenly, melting on warm patches of ground, leaving behind dark spots resembling the tracks of some enormous beast. The massive cylindrical tank towered over the water, resembling a sleeping animal with cracked steel skin. Its sides remembered numerous repairs, hasty welding, and cheap rivets that had long lost their factory strength. Inside, a dark mass pressed slowly against the walls, accumulated throughout the entire year of 1919. The molasses did not simply fill the volume. It lived its own life, expanding from temperature fluctuations and demanding release. Pressure grew with each hour, imperceptible to the eye, but tangible to the metal, which quietly groaned in its seams. Workers had long grown accustomed to strange sounds, ignoring warnings until the structure began changing shape. No one heard the building rumble until it drowned out the creaking of wooden docks and the distant sound of the surf. The noise came not from outside but from within the steel itself, vibrating through the ground and foundations of neighboring buildings. Birds tore from cornices, dogs froze at gates, and cats instinctively huddled in cellars. The vertical seam shuddered first, exposing a rusty strip along which thin streams of dark syrup instantly began to flow. Then the horizontal beam burst, and the structure bent, emitting a prolonged, ear-splitting clang. The air thickened, transforming into an electric atmosphere before the strike. Rivets flew out like bullets, embedding themselves in wood and plaster of opposite buildings. The side wall split into two unequal parts, exposing the inner darkness that poured outward with inhuman force. Instantly, pressure broke free, transforming tons of accumulated molasses into an unstoppable flow. A wall of syrup rose above the street, sweeping away everything in its path with mathematical precision of destruction. The air compressed, transforming into a single elastic medium that pressed against eardrums and squeezed the lungs of passers-by. The earth trembled from the first impact. The wave rolled forward, swallowing lamp posts, barrels, and wooden crates, turning them into debris within fractions of a second. Cobblestones heaved, sidewalks collapsed, and the street transformed into a river of amber lava. The speed of movement reached 60 kilometers per hour, but within the flow, viscosity remained a deadly trap. Anyone caught under the impact instantly lost footing, sinking into the heavy, impenetrable mass. Clothing soaked through, footwear vanished, and limbs froze from cold mixed with sticky resistance. Time slowed, yielding to the pure physics of falling. The moment stretched into eternity when the sweet hurricane covered the block, transforming the familiar cityscape into a nightmarish landscape. Roofs cracked under pressure, windows burst from vibration, and the air thickened to the state of an almost solid substance. No one had time to scream. No one had time to retreat. The catastrophe asked no permission. It simply took space, filling it with itself. When the first wave struck the brick walls of the warehouses, the city understood that winter had ended not with the arrival of warmth, but with the fall of a dark sky. Sweet darkness consumed everything. 2. The air carried the scent of scorched sugar and twisted metal, though the first month of winter held the city in a biting grip. Frost could not pierce the heavy sweetness hanging over tiled roofs and narrow alleys like an invisible shroud. Breathing grew laborious, a sticky residue clinging to lips that neither wool scarves nor raised collars could shield. The streets seemed suspended in quiet anticipation, yet no one recognized the stillness as a warning. The wind brought faint crackling from the waterfront, but pedestrians dismissed it as ice shifting within buried pipes. Snow fell in uneven patches, melting against warm ground and leaving dark stains that mirrored the footprints of some colossal creature. The massive cylindrical tower loomed above the water, resembling a dormant beast with fractured steel hide. Its exterior bore the scars of rushed repairs, hurried welding, and inexpensive rivets that had long surrendered their original integrity. Inside, a dark mass pressed steadily against the walls, gathered throughout the entire year of 1919. The syrup did not merely occupy space. It behaved as a living entity, swelling with temperature shifts and demanding escape. Pressure accumulated with each passing hour, unseen by human eyes yet deeply felt by the metal, which groaned quietly along its seams. Laborers had grown numb to the strange noises, ignoring every caution until the structure began to warp. No one perceived the rising tremor until it swallowed the creaking of wooden docks and the distant rhythm of the tide. The vibration originated not from the open air but from within the steel itself, traveling through soil and the bedrock of nearby buildings. Birds abandoned eaves, dogs rooted themselves at gates, and cats slipped instinctively into darkened cellars. The vertical seam quivered first, revealing a corroded line where thin rivulets of dark liquid began to seep. Then the horizontal support fractured, and the frame bowed, releasing a prolonged, ear-splitting shriek. The atmosphere thickened, turning into a charged medium moments before impact. Rivets shot outward like lead shot, embedding themselves into timber and plaster across the opposite block. The outer wall split into two uneven sections, exposing a hollow darkness that poured outward with unnatural velocity. Containment broke in a single instant, converting thousands of tons of stored syrup into an unstoppable torrent. A wall of brown fluid rose above the thoroughfare, erasing everything in its path with the cold precision of structural failure. The surrounding air compressed into a single heavy blanket, pressing against eardrums and crushing the chests of those caught outside. The pavement shuddered at the surge rolled forward, consuming lamp standards, wooden barrels, and cargo crates, shattering them into splinters within fractions of a second. Cobblestones buckled, walkways collapsed, and the avenue transformed into a churning river of amber sludge. Forward velocity reached 60 kilometers per hour, yet within the current, thickness remained a fatal snare. Anyone struck lost balance instantly, plunging into the dense, opaque medium. Fabric soaked through, footwear disappeared, and joints locked from freezing cold combined with viscous drag. Chronology slowed, surrendering to the raw mechanics of descent. The instant stretched into eternity as the sweet tempest blanketed the neighborhood, warping familiar architecture into a nightmarish landscape. Shingles cracked under weight, glass panes shattered from harmonic vibration, and the atmosphere thickened to the consistency of a semi-solid gel. No throat managed to scream. No pair of legs managed to retreat. The event requested no permission. It simply claimed territory, occupying it completely. When the leading edge struck the brick facades of storage buildings, the district realized that winter had not ended with seasonal thaw, but with the collapse of a darkened sky. Sweet obscurity swallowed everything. Its surface appeared smooth and deceptively tranquil, like a polished mirror hiding a violent undercurrent. Every ripple along the crest bore the burden of countless tons, transforming ordinary food product into a geological hammer shaped by gravity alone. Surrounding oxygen compressed, pushed aside by the advancing tide, generating a localized zone of crushing density where inhalation became a physical struggle. The duality of its composition made it inescapable. The frontal boundaries surged with destructive momentum, while the internal structure clung, wrapped, and consumed. Objects struck by the flow did not deflect sideways, but sank immediately, surrendering all kinetic energy. Motion converted into sheer compressive force, flattening rigid forms without hesitation. Pedestrians found no time to step backward. Their boots, pressing against familiar stone, suddenly found no anchor as the ground beneath them fractured and heaved. Eyes locked on the waterfront registered only an advancing monolith of darkened caramel. Survival reflexes activated too late, collapsing into the basic mechanics of falling. Palms reached toward adjacent brickwork, but fingers slid across damp mortar, finding no purchase. The clockwork of reality decelerated, stretching each fraction of a second to the absolute threshold of human endurance. The sticky barrier swept across entire districts, converting avenues into channels of heavy amber fluid. Masonry that had stood for generations became merely a temporary obstruction. Building corners sheared away, decorative cornices rained down as dust, and stone footings yielded under impossible load. The substance seeped into every mortar line, every hairline fracture, pushing out trapped atmosphere and filling empty spaces with relentless density. It did not travel across surfaces. It displaced volume itself, claiming territory with mechanical indifference. Skeletal structures fractured on impact, respiration halted under the weight of clinging force. Bodies caught in the central current could not fight pressure that surrounded them from every angle. Thoracic cages compressed, ribs cracked beneath the liquid burden, and lungs refused. Life-sustaining air was replaced by cloying mass that forced its way into nasal passages and oral cavities. Every attempt to move required superhuman exertion, yet resistance multiplied with each desperate struggle. Structures groaned under sustained pressure, ceilings collapsed, and wagons alongside livestock vanished into the darkened current without a single audible signal. Timber beams that had supported overhead weight for decades snapped with a dry report instantly swallowed by the thick medium. Equine hooves struck pavement in final convulsions, but surges carried them downward, pulling them into the depths. Loaded carts overturned, wooden containers shattered, and merchandise sank into the sluggish stream, leaving only rust-colored streaks across the surface. Cellars flooded to the ceiling, stairwells filled from the bottom up, and window gaps surrendered to creeping infiltration. The liquid hunted every opening, every structural weakness, seeking entry into habitable spaces. Door frames bowed outward. Iron hinges tore free from mounting plates under escalating weight. Window glass shattered from differential pressure, allowing freezing winter drafts to rush inward, only to instantly blend with heavy syrup. Chairs floated upside down, bookshelves tipped over, personal belongings collided in mute disorder until interior rooms became submerged tombs. It showed mercy to neither masonry nor flesh. Limestone exteriors, crafted by artisans of previous centuries, crumbled beneath the adhesive flood. Iron balcony railings twisted into useless loops. Human and animal forms merged into a single drifting mass, losing distinct silhouettes. The substance wrapped around, sealed, and preserved. It did not annihilate instantly. It submerged gradually, forcing recognition of finality in every slow gesture, every constricting breath, every dimming stare. The urban landscape locked in sugary asphyxiation. Thoroughfares, recently alive with commerce and foot traffic, turned into quiet trenches of the upper layer slowly surrendered fluidity, crystallizing into a semi-rigid shell while warm liquid continued to shift beneath. The atmosphere grew dense, saturated with notes of burnt caramel, oxidized iron, and damp soil. Each inhalation grew heavier, drawing microscopic sugar crystals that coated respiratory linings. Vitality in the affected zone ceased, yielding to absolute stillness. The mechanics of the event operated with cold accuracy. The advancing front was not simple liquid, but a chaotic non-Newtonian suspension, behaving like solid rock under sudden force, and like heavy oil under gradual motion. Struggles to escape only intensified resistance. Panic demanded rapid movement, and rapid movement transformed syrup into concrete. Those who remained motionless sank slower, but held no path to survival. Those who fought drained their reserves within minutes, plunging deeper with every frantic pull. The dark accumulation sealed crossroads, forming temporary barriers and swirling eddies. Where separate currents collided, extreme pressure zones developed, compressing masonry fragments and timber debris into solid blocks. Tree trunks lining the promenade snapped at their bases, leafy canopies disappearing beneath the amber sheet. Earth beneath root systems washed away, turning planted groves into leaning timbers sticking from a viscous mire. Natural urban features vanished, replaced by an alien topography. Lamplight reflecting off the glossy expanse created ghostly shimmering points flickering in the deepening twilight. Shadows elongated, warped, and blended into uniform darkness. No vocalization pierced the air above the streets, absorbed by the dense medium that dampened all acoustic transmission. The quiet was total, interrupted only by the soft suction of settling material and the occasional snap of splintering wood. This silent ordeal lasted mere minutes, yet stretched in human perception into endless duration. Ambient temperature assumed critical importance. Freezing air instantly chilled the outermost layers of the flow, creating a brittle shell that fractured under the weight of fresh syrup pushing from behind. Beneath this frozen armor, original heat remained trapped, generating a stark contrast that deepened the sense of unnatural intrusion. Arms extended above the surface in final attempts to grasp oxygen quickly stiffened, yet stayed raised, as if locked in silent appeal. Architectural elements that had weathered centuries of storms and fires collapsed before this material. Decorative plaster peeled from ceilings, sinking alongside wallpaper and woven rugs. Water conduits burst from internal strain, introducing clear liquid into the stream, which instantly blended with the syrup, altering its texture. The mixture grew more treacherous, generating foam and trapped gas bubbles that ruptured, releasing sweet vapor into the cold air. Creatures confined to stables and rear courtyards thrashed in restricted spaces, finding no exit. Wooden doors slammed shut under pressure, frames tore from surrounding masonry. Syrup-filled animal stalls to the knee, then the waist, then reached overhead beams. Respiration became shallow, nostrils flared in useless attempts to draw matted together, vision clouded with sticky film. Final muscular spasm ceased when the material completely covered the head, leaving only a smooth, unbroken surface. Human forms caught at building thresholds froze in unnatural postures. Some raised arms to shield faces, others reached blindly toward door handles, others simply stood immobilized by sheer dread. The liquid wrapped around them, filling fabric folds, seeping beneath collars and sleeve cuffs. It left no evidence of struggle, only capturing the exact moment of surrender. Every textile wrinkle, every bodily contour preserved in this amber vault with chilling precision. Wind moving from the river direction carried fine airborne droplets, settling onto the skin of those positioned on elevated terrain. Sweet film coated cheeks, eyelashes, and hair. It resisted removal by simple hand motions, leaving a tacky residue that hardened in the cold. Respiratory passages became irritated, triggering coughing fits, yet coughing only worsened the condition, forcing deeper inhalation of heavy air. Pulmonary tissue absorbed microscopic particles, turning each breath into prolonged discomfort. Streets transformed into a maze of unpassable walls and steep drops of solidifying material. Where the flow encountered barriers, it spilled over edges, forming slow-moving cascades of thick liquid that gradually froze mid-descent. Stone steps disappeared beneath uniform syrup layers, converting staircases into treacherous slopes. Metal handrails bent under the accumulating weight, while brick walls stained with rust-colored runoff resembling dried organic matter. Sounds of structural failure gradually faded, replaced by the rising murmur of settling material. Heavy sections shifted, filling empty spaces, forcing trapped air through narrow gaps. This process produced a low, resonant vibration felt not through hearing but through skeletal structure. Ground beneath footwear trembled, transmitting oscillations upward through legs and spines. Each passing second brought fresh displacement, deeper sinking, tighter spatial compression. The municipality did not perish instantly. It entered suspended animation beneath The upper layer gradually flattened, acquiring a glass-like finish. Reflections of ruined facades, leaning street lamps, and overcast sky distorted within this viscous plane. Fissures opened in scattered locations, through which dark sludge slowly crept upward. It hunted every exit, filled every cavity, every crack in the pavement. Cast iron sewer covers popped outward, flipping over to reveal dark openings instantly sealed by sweet mass. The atmosphere above the scene grew heavy and saturated. Steam rising from warm syrup mixed with freezing fog, generating a thick atmospheric curtain. Sight distance dropped to mere yards, converting familiar avenues into a phantom woodland of blurred shapes. Movement through this environment required extreme physical effort, resembling wading through deep snow multiplied several times over. Yet even packed snow lacked such adhesive grip. Every forward step produced a tearing noise, as if rubber soles bonded permanently to the ground. Courtyards filled completely, raising liquid levels to first-floor windows. Panes facing inward spaces ended up fully submerged. Glass fractured from sustained pressure, moisture seeped inward, blending with upholstered chairs and paper volumes. Printed pages softened, ink bled outward, turning official records into meaningless smears. Framed portraits detached from cardboard mounts depicted faces warped, blurred, vanished. Neighborhood history dissolved within amber sludge. Metal frameworks supporting bridges and elevated walkways began warping under lateral force. Fastening bolts stretched, welded joints separated, forming hazardous gaps. Syrup currents penetrated utility corridors, flooding cable trenches and electrical substations. Power circuits shorted, producing rare electrical flashes that instantly died within the thick medium. Municipal infrastructure, never engineered for such conditions, collapsed without resistance, sinking into sweet obscurity. Observer reactions followed a predictable pattern of paralysis. Those watching from elevated or distant locations stood frozen, unable to do. Hands instinctively rose toward faces, fingers curled into tight fists, yet physical bodies refused to follow mental commands. Terror locked muscular systems, transforming spectators into rigid figures. Human cognition refused to process the full scale of the event, categorizing it as illusion or waking nightmare. Yet the smell of burnt sugar and biting wind against exposed skin forced recognition of brutal reality. Chronological progression lost its standard measurement. Public timepieces continued their mechanical cycles, yet their indicators appeared motionless. Minutes elongated into hours, hours merged into a single prolonged moment of submersion. Sunlight breaking through cloud cover cast extended shadows across the stream, yet illumination provided no warmth. It merely highlighted the topography of hardening material, emphasizing its alien nature. Existence paused, holding collective breath before the unavoidable conclusion. Beneath the syrup cover, gradual decay continued uninterrupted. Masonry walls, stripped of foundational support, collapsed inward, generating rubble piles. Timber floors sagged, cracked, dropped, creating additional pressure layers. Liquid penetrated concrete bases, washing away compacted earth and sand, undermining structural footings. Certain buildings leaned at acute angles, others settled unevenly, others simply sank, disappearing below grade alongside basement storage. Urban geometry shifted in real time. Trapped air pockets beneath hardening surfaces generated false hope. Individuals and enclosed spaces attempted using them for respiration. Oxygen reserves depleted rapidly, replaced by carbon dioxide buildup. Breathing accelerated, heartbeats echoed in temples, dread escalated. Every physical motion consumed remaining breathable air. Silence within confinement remained absolute, broken only by personal wheezing and cardiac rhythm counting final beats. The external environment appeared severed by an invisible barrier. Distress signals, shouted warnings, visual appeals drowned within the viscous medium, failing to reach rescue teams still organized. Radio frequencies penetrated the thickness, yet receiving equipment remained silent, submerged in sticky material. Communication cables snapped, wooden poles fell, transmission networks severed. The affected zone entered complete informational isolation, cut from the broader city by a dense, impenetrable veil. The physics of sinking permitted no optimism. With each additional centimeter of depth, compressive force increased, tightening around the ribcage, pressing against the diaphragm. Blood circulation slowed, extremities stiffened, mental clarity dissolved. Sensory distortions replaced external reality, fabricating rescue scenarios that did not exist. Cerebral function, starved of oxygen, began retrieving imagery from deep memory archives, attempting to escape unbearable present conditions. Tangible existence dissolved within amber haze. The upper surface finally solidified, converting streets into a continuous solid plain. Fracture lines across it resembled networks of dried riverbeds through which daily life had recently flowed. Wind lifted fine particles of dried syrup from outer edges, distributing them across surrounding areas. Material settled on rooftops of intact structures, on remaining foliage, on outer garments of bystanders. The city suffered total annihilation. It entered preservation. In this hardened state, it retained complete memory of the disaster, awaiting the moment when frozen crust would begin to thaw. 3. The cold seized the liquid syrup instantly, transforming it into a semi-solid trap. A freezing wind swept in from the river, biting exposed skin, but for the molasses it acted as a catalyst for crystallization. The upper layers, exposed to the winter air, lost their fluidity within minutes. They thickened, grew heavier, and formed a viscous barrier that arrested motion with mathematical precision. What had just moments earlier surged with devastating speed now resembled setting concrete. Every ripple on the surface faded, yielding to absolute stillness. The surrounding air seemed clearer, yet in truth, it was saturated with microscopic sugar particles settling over. Movement slowed, but it did not cease. Beneath the thin crust of frozen glaze, a hidden life persisted. The warm mass, retaining the heat of compression and latent chemical reactions, slowly shifted from one depression to another. It sought weaknesses in the icy shell, pressing through them with invisible weight. The pulsation was barely perceptible, yet tangible to those standing at the edge. The ground beneath their boots trembled at a low frequency, transmitting vibrations upward through thick soles. This was not the silence of death. It was the breathing of a slumbering leviathan, biding its time. People drowned not in water, but in a thick caramel abyss. The fluid offered no buoyancy. Its density exceeded that of the human body, yet surface tension and viscosity created insurmountable resistance. Attempts to swim only hastened the descent. Syrup enveloped limbs, filled the folds of clothing, and forced its way into airways with every careless breath. Lungs accustomed to atmosphere refused to function in such a medium. Oxygen deprivation arrived slowly, granting time to comprehend each stage of suffocation. Reality narrowed to a single point where only heavy, sweet darkness remained. Hands breaking through the surface froze in unnatural postures. Fingers curled by spasms or stretched in final gestures of pleading became part of the landscape. They protruded from the amber mass like broken branches of a dead tree. The crust quickly encased them, locking them in the exact position it found them. No wind could bend them. No sun could melt this natural plaster. They remained silent witnesses, accusing fingers embedded in a sweet monolith. Every curve of the wrist, every fractured nail preserved the memory of a final struggle. Rescuers arrived with shovels and ropes, but every step sank. Heavy boots, accustomed to solid ground, plunged knee-deep into the sticky mire. Wooden handles bent under unfamiliar strain. Iron blades bogged down, refusing to scoop or dig. Ropes thrown into the mass found no purchase. They slid across the smooth surface, catching on nothing. Those attempting to reach the center became trapped by their own gear. Equipment designed for entirely different disasters became dead weight. Tactics had to shift. Planks, logs, any makeshift platform became essential. The sludge held victims like flies in hardened resin. Resistance multiplied with every exertion. The harder they pulled, the tighter the mass gripped. It did not release. It consumed, exploiting the physics of non-Newtonian fluids. Panic traveled up the ropes, which snapped or slipped from numb fingers. Progress demanded slowness, precision, careful cutting through layers, carving trenches around trapped forms. Every centimeter extracted required hours of labor. Fingers stiffened by the cold refused to obey. Breath plumed into vapor, mingling with a cloying stench. Patience became the only reliable tool. For weeks, they pulled bodies free, each coated in a glossy film. The work settled into a grim routine, stripped of hope but bound by duty. Cranes rolled to the perimeter, their booms lowering heavy hooks. Chains wrapped around recovered shapes. Winches drew them slowly onto solid ground. The loads dropped onto canvas with a dull, wet thud. Fabric fused to skin. Hair hardened into stiff ropes. Faces, when cleared of residue, bore expressions of profound calm or absolute terror. Each form was laid in a row, covered with a sheet, and left for identification. The bodies were steeped in the scent of molasses and iron. Sweetness blended with oxidized blood, rusted metal, and damp earth. The bouquet defied masking. Disinfectants only suppressed it temporarily, reacting to form sharper, more acrid fumes. Physicians and laborers grew accustomed to it, though no human physiology could fully adapt. The sense of smell dulled, yet a background nausea remained a constant companion. Mittens, boots, tools, everything absorbed the odor. Cold air could not blow it away. It seeped into the pores of every material, becoming the odor refused to dissipate. It seeped into the walls of neighboring buildings, settled on drapes, and soaked into wooden furniture. Residents of blocks outside the blast zone still felt its presence. It rode the wind, slipped through closed windows, and settled on dishes. Cooking became torture, as every ingredient took on an alien tang. Children cried at the unfamiliar air. Elders crossed themselves, reading the phenomenon as divine retribution. Yet the nature of the smell was pure chemistry. It consisted of millions of volatile compounds born of heat and pressure, now slowly cooling. It embedded itself in skin, fabric, and lungs. Soap merely smeared the sticky layer, turning water into a cloudy emulsion. Scrape stripped the upper epidermis, exposing raw, inflamed flesh. Yet the sensation of syrup lingering never faded. Nerve endings, irritated by microscopic particles, kept firing signals to the brain. Hands felt perpetually coated. Throats felt constricted by an invisible noose. The mind could not accept escape from the zone. It continued simulating submersion, generating phantom symptoms. The body remembered what the intellect wished to discard. Survivors woke in the night, gasping at a phantom thickness. Sleep brought not rest, but return. In dreams they drowned again, felt the weight again, heard the silence again. A sharp inhalation tore through the dark, yet lungs refused to fill. Chests tightened, pulses spiked, cold sweat beaded on foreheads. They sat upright, grasping at empty air, trying to prove wakefulness. But the heaviness remained in the throat. It did not fade with dawn. It became part of their physiology, a chronic condition demanding daily proof of life. They scrubbed their hands raw, trying to wash away an invisible film. Hot water, lye, alcohol, nothing worked. Skin reddened, cracked, bled. Yet the itch persisted. The sensation of stickiness clung to palms, fingertips, inner wrists. Psychologists spoke of obsessive states, post-traumatic stress, the necessity of time. But time only taught them to endure the discomfort. People began wearing gloves to avoid bare contact with objects. They avoided mirrors, fearing to catch a gloss in their own eyes. Purity became an unreachable ideal. Work shifts rotated without pause. Shovels snapped, cables frayed, engines stalled. Molasses clogged carburetors, choked filters, ruined machinery. Manual labor became the only recourse, relying on brute strength and endurance. Backs arched, joints ached, calluses broke into open sores. Yet halting was impossible. Beneath every fresh layer, life might linger, or remains deserving of proper rest. Every recovered object was logged. Every cleared meter of street was marked on maps. Progress measured in centimeters, but relentless. Medical aid was administered on site. Tents pitched on higher ground, well clear of extraction zones. The injured laid on stretchers, wounds rinsed, warm liquids poured down throats. But the deepest wound lay within. It did not bleed, did not fester, yet refused to close. Airways remained swollen. Voices grew hoarse, coughs turned harsh and lingering. Doctors offered helpless shrugs, prescribing inhalers and rest. But rest never came. Survivors' eyes stayed open, fixed on a single point. In them reflected the surface they could never truly leave. City authorities attempted to restore order. Curfews enacted, access restricted, supplies rationed. But order was an illusion. Real life unfolded in the quarantine zone, among canvas tarps, cranes, and spades. Reporters wrote of heroism, unity, swift return to normalcy. But words rang hollow against the stench. Photographs failed to convey weight. Images of crust-covered hands sparked only detached curiosity. The true scale remained inexpressible. It existed solely in the senses of those who stood nearby. Nature slowly adapted to the shift. Crows perched on hardened edges, pecked at solid chunks, and flew off. Rats sought detours, burrowing beneath the crust. Plants caught in the zone wilted, but did not perish immediately. Roots kept reaching for moisture, finding it in unexpected places. Syrup seeped into soil, altering composition, acidity, structure. Trees the following year might grow twisted. Earth might yield strange fruit. The disaster had not ended. It had retreated underground, woven into the ecosystem, an invisible stratum of history. Winter blizzards buried cleared sections in fresh snow. White cover temporarily hid amber stains, crafting an illusion of purity. But beneath the snowpack, thawing continued. Warm mass rose, softening ice, forming puddles. Snow-absorbed syrup grew heavy, gray, foul. It was shoveled away, but returned with every thaw. The cycle repeated. Streets grew slick, treacherous. Pedestrians slipped, stained their clothes, cursed fate. Yet no decree could forbid nature from claiming its due. Physics bowed to no human edict. Memory of the event materialized in every survivor's gesture. They avoided thick soups, heavy sauces, sweet drinks. The sight of caramel triggered stomach cramps. The sound of pouring liquid made them flinch. Children born after the catastrophe grew up amid unspoken prohibitions. No explanations were offered. They simply watched adults freeze at certain odors, saw them wash hands 10 times over, observed them test floor stability before stepping forward. Trauma passed not through words, but through behavior, through silent rituals of survival. Rescuers retired, but never forgot. Their hands remembered the weight of ropes. Their backs remembered the lean over trenches. Their noses remembered the scent. Veterans of the disaster gathered in quiet bars, where sugar left no trace. They sat in silence, staring into glasses. Words were unnecessary. Each knew what lay beneath the smooth surface of calm. Each felt the ground sometimes tremble beneath boots, a reminder of hidden voids. They moved on, yet a fragment of them remained in that place, in that hour, in that thick, The city endured, but altered its blueprint. Streets straightened, foundations reinforced, storage tanks outlawed. Architects calculated new loads, engineers revised formulas. Yet the true lesson never made it into drafting tables. It lived in instinct, in how people stepped back from dark puddles, in how they tested the air before descending into cellars, in how they cherished the simple ease of breath. Sweet death left no mark on maps, only on collective memory. It taught fear of the unseen, respect for the dense, remembrance of what never fades. 4. Shovels bent under strain, blades warping into useless curves. Metal forged for earth met resistance unnamed in manuals. Every strike sent tremors up handles, wrenching joints. Cables snapped, fraying into fibers unable to bear the load. Ropes slid across glossy surfaces, finding no anchor. Winches groaned, gears ground, yet weight exceeded limits. The substance yielded to no conventional method. It shifted between depressions, filling voids with precision. Each hollow sealed instantly with fresh material. Edges smoothed. Surfaces regained wholeness. Scooping it resembled fighting an organism capable of instant regeneration. Physics outmatched human will. Tools broke, muscles failed, yet the mass persisted. Beneath hardened syrup, outlines of shattered freight cars emerged. Wooden platforms once carrying cargo now resembled skeletal remains washed ashore. Barrels bound by iron hoops lay sideways, lids torn, contents dissolved into sludge. Splintered boards jutted at odd angles, mimicking shipwreck debris. City architecture became an archaeological stratum, where every fragment held destruction's imprint. Workers brushed away crust, exposing forms belonging to recent daily life. They now served as disaster artifacts sealed in amber. Dust rarely rose, air remaining too damp. Instead, microscopic sugar settled everywhere, turning surroundings into a sticky exhibit. Steel plates torn from the tank lay beside bodies, like discarded shields. Surfaces bore rust patina blended with dark syrup. Edges appeared jagged, yet closer inspection revealed a quieter truth. They were thinner than blueprints demanded. Metal gauge failed to match load calculations. Factory stamps now read with difficulty, worn by friction and corrosion. Engineering standards ignored to reduce expenses. Every saved millimeter became a millimeter of ruin. Plates lay exposed, demonstrating flood force and human negligence. They failed under pressure because they were never meant to hold it. Their thinness was a weld seams crumbled at touch, dissolving into powdery residue. Metal meant to bind structure proved brittle, porous, filled with trapped air. Joints could not withstand minimal stress. Sparks from electrodes had not forged a monolith, but merely glued fragments. Laborers noted uneven penetration, signs of haste, absent oversight. Every seam was a weak point, every fracture a predictable outcome. Inspections conducted as formalities, reports signed without verification. Tolerances inflated for faster completion. Result lay scattered, displaying exact price of saved funds. Collapse was not accidental. It was precise consequence of compromises paid by others. Authorities ordered streets cleared, issuing directives rapidly. Bureaucratic machines demanded reports, schedules, recovery plans. Officials demanded normalization, ignoring physical reality. Commands collided with conditions disregarding paper deadlines. Each layer removed uncovered evidence of haste and calculation. Beneath surface lay simplified foundations, substituted materials, shortened timelines. Documentation held signatures of those approving code deviations. Facts filled logs, yet logs did not lighten weight against spades. Leadership viewed crisis as cleanup task rather than systemic failure. Orders sounded confident, reality answered with silent persistence. Every peeled layer revealed deeper carelessness. Timber rotted faster, metal tore easier, fasteners held weaker. Building codes degraded into suggestions, suggestions ignored for profit. Calculations lived on paper, never tested under actual conditions. Economy became priority, safety deferred. That date arrived, cost proved unbearable. Survivors watching labor saw not accident but inevitability. Every fragment testified to decisions made long before rupture. System operated exactly as designed. It optimized expenses while dismissing hazards. Hazards materialized as sweet wall. Molasses was not nature's act. It stood as verdict delivered by human indifference. Gravity, temperature, pressure followed physical laws, yet humans set initial conditions. Vessel did not burst from lightning or tremors. It fractured from tension accumulated through structural inadequacy. Substance harbored no malice. It followed path of least resistance. Engineers and builders carved that path. They channeled destructive energy into precise direction. Judgment was not sudden. It matured over months, signed in offices, concealed in ledgers. Catastrophe was final scene of prolonged procedure. Thickness preserved handprints with clarity of wet sand. Fingers pressed into surface captured exact moment of contact. Nail contours, skin ridges, joint curves remained untouched. Fabric scraps fused into mass, threads retaining weave and color. Frozen faces held expressions locked in final second. Material acted as preservative, halting time microscopically. It did not erase details. It sealed them. Each print became testimony of presence. Each fold stored memory of motion. Event did not wash away traces. It rendered them permanent. Air thickened daily, saturated with vapors rising from warm mass. Sugar molecules permeated atmosphere, mixing with dust, settling everywhere. Breathing turned into crushing burden. Lungs accustomed to clean oxygen filtered viscous blend, irritating membranes. Inhalation demanded extra effort. Exhalation left cloying sweetness. Dizziness became routine. Fatigue accumulated. Focus fractured. Organisms adapted slowly, rejecting foreign environment. Coughing brought no relief. Throats remained raw, nasal passages constricted, eyes watered from exposure. Atmosphere transformed into invisible weight pressing against ribcages. Survivors watched laborers digging and grasped hidden truth. Shovels bit into mass, ropes dropped into trenches, cranes lifted loads. Movement mimicked progress, outcome remained illusory. Every extracted volume replaced by fresh flow from deeper layers. Streets were not cleansed. They were reshaped. Crews rotated, faces coated in film, hands numbed by cold. Protocol demanded clearance. Reality demanded acknowledgement of defeat. Observers witnessed not restoration, but delayed surrender. Digging became ritual leading nowhere. They understood this was not rescue but slow burial beneath thrift. Each cubic meter removed cost effort, time, health. Foundations remained saturated. Soil retained residue. Groundwater carried particles outward, spreading contamination beyond borders. Economies spawning disaster continued functioning. Firms collected payouts. Contractors signed agreements. Authorities filed reports. System preserved itself, shifting burden onto those remaining. Entombment occurred not underground but beneath paperwork, directives, settlements. Living found themselves buried alive in administrative maze. Workers did not halt, though results felt ghostly. Stopping meant admitting defeat. Continuing offered illusion of control. Every shovel strike defied helplessness. Muscles ached, spines bowed, breath grew ragged. Rhythm persisted. Mechanical motion replaced meaning. Humans became components in machine-shifting material. Mechanism demanded no purpose. It merely ran. Function substituted comprehension. Understanding arrived late. When muscles refused commands, vision blurred, reality merged with haze. Substance continued living by its own rules, ignoring schedules. It seeped into foundation cracks, washed away clay, altered hydrology. Tree roots absorbed sweet moisture, warping wood. Soil grew heavy, compacted, impermeable to rain. Underground streams diverted, carving new channels. Ecological balance fractured permanently. Nature did not recover. It adapted to fresh conditions, spawning alien forms. Disaster did not end when tank ruptured. It slipped into hidden phase, persisting beneath pavement, deep in earth. Survivors carried irreversible damage. Lungs trapped particles, skin remembered stickiness, nerves flinched at pouring sounds. Sleep delivered no rest, only repetition. Dreams returned weight, amber expanse, silence swallowing cries. Waking brought no comfort. It confirmed survival. Endurance became punishment demanding validation. Body retained what mind erased. Memory stored itself in reflexes, spasms, labored breathing triggered by sense. City tried forgetting, painting facades, relaying pavement, planting trees. Fresh paint refused to absorb odor. New stone settled onto tainted ground. Saplings struggled, roots meeting resistance in altered soil. Appearance recovered, internal structure remained compromised. Residents returned to homes, but not to past. They adjusted to reality where air felt heavy, quiet seemed suspicious, sidewalks might hide snare. Memory woven into daily life, becoming invisible filter. World did not return. It became something else, forever marked by 5. Steam cleaners and laborers washed the cobblestones with boiling water and lime, creating clouds of vapor that mingled with the winter fog. High-pressure jets blasted the hardened crust, turning it into a murky emulsion that drained into sewer grates. Lime hissed as it reacted with sugar, forming a pale foam that slowly settled over the pavement. Workers in rubberized suits moved in methodical lines, treating every square meter with grim precision. Steam burned their faces, but the biting wind instantly cooled the skin, leaving behind the sensation of a sticky film that could never be fully washed away. Water flowing into the drains carried the last visible traces of the amber coating, yet the scent remained. It had seeped into the pores of stone, the grain of brick, the timber of support beams. Building facades were scrubbed with stiff wire brushes, stripping away layers of dried syrup along with paint and plaster. The grinding echo rolled through the blocks, sounding like the slow knitting of a wound. Timber soaked through with molasses was sawn into sections, deemed beyond salvage. Wood saturated with sweet mass grew heavy, brittle, prone to rot. Debris was loaded onto wagons and hauled to distant dumps beyond the city limits. Yet every cart leaving the zone left a trail of fine particles scattered by the wind. Dust settled on rooftops, fences, and the clothes of passers-by. Cleansing was not removal, merely relocation. Within a few months, the thoroughfares regained their stony character. Cobblestones were relaid, joints packed with fresh mortar. Tram tracks were realigned, contacts tested, trial runs scheduled. The familiar ring of conductor bells returned to established routes. Passengers boarded without glancing at their feet. Shops opened their doors, hanging bright signs to draw customers with discounts and new stock. Children ran along sidewalks, rolling hoops, spinning tops, unaware of what lay beneath the fresh asphalt. Play continued, laughter rang true, yet adults sometimes froze at distant cracking sounds or caught a familiar sweet tang on the breeze. Nothing recalled the flood, save for an invisible weight pressing on the chests of those who remained. Survivors walked the same streets, but their steps grew cautious, their watchfulness sharp. They avoided dark patches on the pavement, shunned cellars carrying that distinct odor, distrusted stillness. The body remembered what the mind tried to discard. At the sound of pouring liquid, muscles tensed. At the sight of thick sauces, stomachs contracted. Sleep offered no rest, only a return to the amber void. Waking confirmed survival, but granted no relief. The heaviness stayed a constant companion, a chronic condition demanding daily. The city's memory faded faster than syrup from pavement. Official records logged dates, figures, names, but conveyed no sensation. Photographs captured ruin, but not the stench. Work reports detailed operations, but not the ache in laborers' arms. The municipality rushed to forget, repainting facades, relaying streets, planting young trees. Fresh paint refused to absorb the odor. New stone settled onto tainted soil. Saplings took root slowly, their fibers meeting resistance in altered earth. Appearance recovered, internal structure remained compromised. Reports settled into dusty archives, stacked in folders with neat labels. Papers held signatures, seals, dates, but not the weight of spades, the bite of wind, the tackiness of fingers. Courts delivered verdicts based on legal statutes rather than physical reality. Compensation sums were transferred, receipts signed, cases closed. The system completed its procedure, drew a line, filed the matter away. Yet a mark on paper did not mean an end in reality. Subterranean processes continued, indifferent to bureaucratic deadlines. Liquid did not read ledgers, acknowledge judgments, or accept settlements. Life flowed in its former channel, yet beneath the surface viscous fluid continued seeping. It moved slowly, relentlessly, governed by capillary action and gravity. Tree roots absorbed sweet moisture, altering wood structure, accelerating growth, or causing warping. Soil grew dense, compacted, impermeable to rainfall. Underground streams shifted course, carving new paths, washing out foundations of older structures. Ecological balance fractured permanently. Nature did not recover. It adapted to fresh conditions, spawning forms alien to previous eras. Fluid penetrated cellars, filling cracks in concrete, seeping through brickwork. The odor intensified in confined spaces, becoming unbearable for those descending for coal or preserved goods. Homeowners aired out rooms, burned incense, yet the smell returned with every thaw. It was not an accidental guest. It became a permanent resident, registered in the foundation. Walls retained what owners wished to forget. Beams held impressions that lime could not erase. Blending with groundwater, the substance altered the chemical makeup of subterranean aquifers. Sugar concentration rose, creating a nutrient medium for microorganisms foreign to this ecosystem. Bacteria multiplied, consuming oxygen, releasing decayed byproducts. Water turned murky, acquired a faint sweet taste masked by mineral salts. Wells, once yielding pure moisture, now demanded filtration, boiling, caution. Yet not everyone knew. Not everyone could afford testing. The city drank from wells, unaware of the taste of what it consumed. Water went into cooking, laundry, garden irrigation. Tea brewed with a light sweetness, soups took on unfamiliar undertones, bread rose differently. Children drank from public fountains, suspecting no hidden admixture. Adults washed their faces each morning, sensing no deception. Organisms adapted gradually, accumulating changes at the cellular level. Livers filtered, kidneys excreted, yet a fraction remained, weaving into tissue. The unseen became routine. Odor ceased to register, taste stopped startling, chest heaviness was blamed on age or weather. Memory dulled, reflexes weakened, vigilance dropped. The municipality lived, not knowing it inhabited a modified environment. Facades gleamed, trams rang, children laughed. Yet beneath the surface quiet transformation persisted. Soil altered composition, water altered flavor, air altered density. The disaster had not ended. It slipped into a hidden phase, continuing in every swallow, every breath, every step on familiar stone. Laborers who finished cleansing returned home, but carried an invisible burden. Their garments retained the scent, their hands remembered stickiness, their lungs filtered microscopic particles. Evenings passed in silence, dreams brought return, mornings confirmed survival. They did not speak of it, did not complain, did not seek pity. They simply lived, adjusting to a new reality where purity was illusion and safety a relative term. The system demanded return to normal, and they complied, as far as possible. Children born after the event grew up amid unspoken prohibitions. No one explained the reason, Yet they watched adults freeze at certain odors, test water before drinking, avoid basements. They learned to read invisible signs, interpret silent gestures, understand what went unvoiced. Trauma passed not through words, but through behavior, through rituals, through intonation. The new generation inherited not memory of the event, but caution toward the unseen. City authorities reported completion of works, infrastructure recovery, return to normal life. Numbers pleased, schedules met, targets exceeded. Yet reports did not measure chest heaviness in survivors, gauge sugar concentration in wells, track ecological shifts. Paper accepted only what could be counted, weighed, signed. Everything else remained outside the margins, in the realm of the invisible, in the sphere of personal experience. Nature kept adapting, generating new life forms. Sugar-feeding fungi appeared in cellars, changing wall colors. Insects drawn to sweetness bred in pavement cracks. Plants absorbing altered moisture yielded fruit with unfamiliar flavor. Evolution accelerated, driven by human interference. The disaster became a catalyst, triggering a chain of changes whose consequences could not be predicted. The municipality turned into a laboratory where experiment continued without participants' knowledge. Survivors aged but did not forget. Their hands trembled at sight of thick liquids, their breath hitched in enclosed spaces, their dreams returned to the amber void. They passed down not stories, but instincts. Not words, but gestures. Not explanations, but caution. Memory lived not in tales, but in reflexes, in muscle spasms, in labored breathing under certain conditions. The body retained what the mind erased. Physics remembered what history forgot. The city endured, yet its essence shifted. Streets led not only to homes, but to past wounds. Facades concealed not only interiors, but traces of ruin. Air carried not only food aromas, but echoes of catastrophe. Residents walked the surface, unaware of the depth. They drank water, tasting no admixture. They breathed, noticing no weight. Yet the body knew. The body remembered. The body kept truth that could not be logged, sealed, archived. The disaster had not ended. It became part of life, an invisible layer of reality, sweet poison dissolved in daily routine. 6. For decades new quarters grew over the old ones, like lichen on forgotten tombstones. Glass and concrete replaced brick and wood, rising higher toward the gray sky. Architects drew straight lines, engineers calculated loads, builders poured foundations. The earth accepted everything without complaint, absorbing the vibrations of rollers and the of jackhammers. Each new floor laid a heavy layer upon the memory of the soil, yet the ground did not forget. It kept the impressions of the past, holding in the depths what people believed had vanished. Concrete piles went deeper, penetrating untouched strata, but the earth remembered every touch. Hydraulic presses drove supports with increasing force, overcoming the resistance of clay and sand. Metal tips crushed old utilities, shifted groundwater, disturbed centuries of peace. Piles became part of the landscape, an invisible skeleton of the growing city. They bore the weight of skyscrapers, shopping centers, underground parking. But beneath them, at a depth where light never penetrated, the dark substance continued to exist. During excavation of pits, excavator buckets lifted dark clumps into the light, hardening quickly in the air. Earth mass mixed with solidified molasses smelled of damp leaves and caramel. Workers examined the finds with curiosity, shaking sticky crumbs from gloves. Pieces cracked under shovel blows, revealing amber veins woven into the clay. No one attached significance to the strange consistency of the ground. They blamed it on local features, old industrial waste, random impurities. Machines kept digging, not slowing their pace. Foremen ordered them walled into foundations, claiming it was just clayey mud. Voices sounded confident, instructions given without doubt. Concrete was poured over the lumps, covering them with a thick layer of cement mortar. rebar wrapped around the fines, steel mesh becoming a cage for foreign material. Building codes did not forbid using soil with impurities, if it did not violate load-bearing capacity. Economy dictated its rules. Waste turned into base, passed into foundation. Walls of new buildings began to sweat on hot days, leaving rust-colored streaks on the plaster. Condensation appeared on surfaces, rolled down in drops, leaving sticky traces behind. Living spaces filled with heavy air, in which an elusive aroma hovered. Windows fogged from the inside, glass covered with a murky film impossible to wipe to a shine. The climate inside buildings changed unnoticed but tangibly. Humidity rose, temperature stayed above normal, ventilation could not handle the load. Walls breathed what was hidden beneath the cladding. Residents wiped them with rags, bought chemical cleaners, complained about the persistent cloying spirit. Household products only temporarily masked the smell, leaving sharp perfumes behind. Fabrics absorbed moisture, furniture deformed, wallpaper peeled from dampness. People aired rooms, turned on heaters, changed filters and conditioners. But the cause remained hidden. The Swedish tint of air penetrated curtains, carpets, upholstery of chairs. It became part of the interior, an invisible guest that could not be thrown out the door. No one linked the sweet nausea with what lay beneath their feet. Headaches were blamed on magnetic storms, fatigue on work schedules, irritability on city bustle. Doctors prescribed sedatives, allergists assigned antihistamines, psychologists recommended rest. Symptoms were treated without reaching the source. Organisms adapted to the constant background, developing tolerance to microdoses. Breathing became shallow, sleep anxious, appetite selective. The body signaled about a foreign environment, the mind ignored warnings. The city prospered, expanded, absorbed the river bank. Cranes towered over the horizon, like steel trees, branches reaching for clouds. Transport arteries pulsed with flows of cars, pedestrian routes crossed in narrow passages. Neon signs burned until dawn, restaurants accepted guests, theaters filled halls. Economic indicators grew, real estate appreciated, tourist routes lengthened. Progress was measured in meters of height and millions of investments. No one looked back. History remained in textbooks, not in foundations. On one summer evening, an old engineer descended into the basement of a new high-rise building to check pipes. A flashlight snatched concrete supports, cable trays, valves from the darkness. Air here was thicker, heavier, filled with the smell of damp stone and something familiar. Steps echoed, dissolving in the hum of pump stations. He walked slowly, checking connections, fixing sensor readings. A professional gaze slid over surfaces, noting corrosion, cracks, traces of leaks. Everything seemed standard, but intuition suggested otherwise. He ran a palm over the concrete slab and tore off a piece of hardened crust. The material yielded unexpectedly easily, crumbling on fingers, exposing a dark core. Beneath the rough surface hid not clay, not sand, not construction debris. There pulsed a warm, thick mass. It was not static. It slowly flowed, filling voids, wrapping metal rods. Heat came from the substance itself, contrasting with the coolness of the basement. Vibration transmitted through the palm, reminding of a living creature locked in a stone shell. He did not fear. Years of work with mechanisms, calculations, loads taught him to perceive anomalies as data. He leaned closer, inhaling air, analyzing consistency, color, smell. Memory flashed instantly, without warning, without request. Images of amber walls, frozen hands, sticky wind returned with physical force. But fear did not come. Instead arose calm acceptance. The substance had not vanished. It waited. It adapted. It became part of the structure, inseparable from concrete and steel. He brought fingers to lips, tried the taste and smiled. Sweetness was intense, concentrated, devoid of foreign impurities. Taste receptors worked instantly, recognizing the familiar combination of sugar, molasses, slight bitterness. The smile expressed no joy. It expressed understanding. Understanding that laws of physics are not cancelled. Understanding that matter does not disappear, but transforms. Understanding that the past does not leave, but sprouts through the present. Taste became the key opening the door to a long-closed room. Syrup flowed from cracks, wrapping rebar, rising up walls, ready for a new day. Viscous liquid sought exit, filling capillaries of concrete, seeping through micro cracks. It did not break the structure. It integrated into it. Steel rods were covered with a protective layer preventing corrosion. Concrete blocks became impregnated, acquiring additional density. The substance acted as a linking element, as cement of another kind. It did not destroy. It consolidated. It made the building a single organism. The city continued to breathe it. Air over quarters saturated with microparticles rising from foundations, seeping through ventilation shafts. Residents did not notice changes, accepting them as norm. Breathing became slightly deeper, sleep slightly sounder, fatigue slightly further. Organisms adapted to constant feeding, using sugar as a hidden resource. Energy redistributed, metabolism slowed, survivability increased. Disaster turned into an ecosystem. Death became a nutrient medium. Destruction became the basis of stability. Concrete walls retained heat in winter, gave coolness in summer, regulating microclimate without technical participation. Liquid inside worked as a thermal buffer, absorbing excess, compensating for lack. Buildings ceased to be inert boxes. They became living structures, reacting to external conditions. Sensors fixed stability, engineers rejoiced at absence of deformations, residents enjoyed comfort. No one asked questions. Results spoke for themselves. Efficiency grew, costs fell, service terms increased, ground under foundations compacted, losing porosity, acquiring monolithic quality. Pressure distributed evenly, excluding subsidence, preventing tilts. Groundwater flowed around saturated layers, not washing them, not carrying particles. Ecosystem stabilized, finding equilibrium in new parameters. Tree roots penetrated sweet layers, receiving nutrition, strengthening slopes. Birds nested in hollows, insects pollinated flowers, soil became more fertile. Nature used the anthropogenic factor, turning threat into reason. The old engineer rose to the surface, leaving behind the quiet basement. Evening air seemed cleaner, but he knew it was an illusion. Cleanliness is relative. The city did not cleanse. It changed. Facades reflected sunset, windows lit with fires, streets filled with hum. Life continued in familiar rhythm, but beneath it flowed another current. Invisible, inaudible, unfelt by most. But it existed. It supported. It nourished. It reminded of the price paid, and the profit. Construction documents were kept in safes, blueprints lay in archives, reports were signed with seals. Nowhere was molasses mentioned. Nowhere was anomaly fixed. Nowhere was connection recognized between past disaster and current stability. System worked on exclusion, on simplification, on control. Reality remained outside frameworks. But reality did not need approval. It simply functioned. Liquid flowed, concrete hardened, buildings stood. Physics required no protocols. It required conditions. Conditions formed. New generations grew in apartments, not knowing about basements, not suspecting foundations, not feeling heaviness of history. They studied in schools, worked in offices, rested in parks. Their world was smooth, predictable, safe. They did not fear cracks, did not listen to creaks, did not check air before entry. Fear vanished, yielding to confidence. Confidence built on ignorance seemed solid. But it rested on a layer not calculated by engineers. It held on a mass, not obeying norms. The engineer returned home, feeling taste on lips, keeping warmth in palms. He did not write a report. He did not call instances. He did not warn. Knowledge does not always require publicity. Sometimes it requires acceptance. He accepted what he saw. He accepted what he felt. He accepted what became part of the city, part of the earth, part of his own biography. Past did not leave. It built in. It became base. It became breath. At night the city froze, lights went out, streets emptied. In silence only quiet hum of ventilation was heard, distant knock of trains, rustle of leaves. Beneath asphalt, beneath sidewalks, beneath foundations continued slow movement. Viscous substance flowed, filling voids, connecting scattered elements. It did not hurry. It did not rush. It existed in its own time, measured not by hours, but by cycles of seeping, not by minutes, but by seasons of hardening. Patience became its main characteristic. Endurance its only. In morning sun rose over horizon, illuminating glass facades, steel frames, concrete spans. City woke, starting motors, turning on light, opening doors. People went out to streets, sat in transport, went to work. No one noticed how earth vibrated slightly under feet. No one felt how air was slightly denser than usual. No one wondered why buildings stood so confidently, why bridges did not bend, why tunnels did not subside. Answers were beneath them. Answers were in them. Answers were sweet to taste. Cycle closed. Disaster bred order. Chaos created structure. Destruction became foundation. City did not survive despite past. It survived thanks to it. Dense mass, once killing now supported. Sticky trap, once absorbing now bound. Amber abyss, once drowning now strengthened. Physics knows no morality. It knows only interactions. Forces balanced. Pressure stabilized. System came to equilibrium. And in this equilibrium was neither victory nor defeat. There was no justice, no retribution. There was only existence. Continuation. Adaptation. City breathed, not knowing with what. Earth held, not remembering whom. Time went, not stopping for a second. But beneath feet, beneath layers of asphalt, beneath concrete slabs, beneath steel frames, pulsed warm, thick, eternal reminder that nothing disappears. Everything only changes form. Everything only waits for its hour.